Hi, everybody. It's just gone 10 o'clock, so we'll get started today. So thank you so much for joining us. My name's Lucy Byrne. I'm from a company called Healthy Tasmania. And today we're your hosts on behalf of the Starting Point Neighbourhood House, which is in Ravenswood in northern Tasmania. Now, this is the third of 5 sessions out of our new webinar series called Mentally Well. And this series is all about how you can stay mentally well during the whole COVID pandemic and the recovery phase, but also how you can keep those that you love around you well too. So today we're going to hope to make it as smooth as possible for you, but as always with these things, sometimes there might be some technical issues, there may be some lag, so bear with us. You'll also see my eyes dashing around a bit as I look at the chat box and the Q&A and manage the participants, so don't be distracted if I'm looking around. And look, it's all about we're being distant, but we don't need to be disconnected. So we want these sessions to be as interactive as possible. So we have got a chat box and we have got a Q&A function. So if you'd like to have a chat, and we've already got some people here in the chat box I can see. Hi, Kim. Hi, Penny. We've got Hayden there. We've got Julie as well. So just say g'day to me in the chat box. Which you'll find if you hover over the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. So if you're just having a chat, please do that. And look, I'd love to hear where you're from. So if you could just chuck that. Hi, Cassandra. Good to have you with us. Chuck in the chat box where you're from and maybe where you are. So I'm currently in Evandale at home. So I'd love to hear. We've already heard Beck from Playgroup Taz is with us today. We've got Bethany from Starting Point Neighbourhood House in Ravenswood. We've got Hayden, who's here with us from Launceston at Door of Hope. Rotham, who's with us from Hobart. Welcome from the chilly south down there. Heidi Jan. So that's great to have you all here with us. If you do have a specific question for our special guest today, Wendy French, or for me, you can put that in the Q&A box. And then we can deal with those questions if it's appropriate throughout the session, or perhaps we'll save it to the end. Now, of course, we can't see you, but you can see us. And look, these sessions will be recorded. So if something does happen with the technology and it drops out, don't fear, they'll be recorded and popped up on the Facebook pages and the websites of both Healthy Tasmania and also the Starting Point Neighbourhood House. So you can watch it there again, and you can also share it with others from those platforms as well. So look, I think one of the things that is really important for us today is that you agree to being recorded as part of these sessions. Like I said before, they'll be put up on the website, but of course you can also be anonymous. So you can choose to be anonymous through the chat box and the Q&A function. We've just had Kanita join from St Helens Neighbourhood House. Welcome to you. And look, today's session is all about understanding mental health for yourself and understanding how you can help others to get help as well. And that's during isolation and following. Now, our special guest today, Wendy, if Wendy, I can get you to put on your camera and your microphone, that would be great. And so Wendy's going to join us.
You're going to need to put my camera on for me, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is your camera? So see if that works for you, Wendy.
That's got it. There we are.
Thank you. Wendy.
Hi, everyone.
So thank you so much for joining us, Wendy. And so like I said, for some of us, we've been in isolation for a long time, but those restrictions are starting to ease. However, some of the mental health things that are going on for us and the people around us will be, you know, they might have been heightened through isolation, but they're going to go into the future, aren't they? So I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. And nice to see people signing in from everywhere, and some familiar names there as well. So hello to those I know and those I don't. Hopefully it won't be too long before we can meet face to face. But strange and interesting times, isn't it? Now, I'm of the older generation, so my technological skills leave a little to be desired. So bear with me. I'll be probably a bit like Lucy. The eyes will be going every which way. But I just want to start. I've got a couple of things here. And Lucy, I need to be able to share my screen. I wonder if you've disabled that there.
Have I?
Uh-huh.
Interesting. So
let me try again. No.
So that's interesting, Wendy. Let me just play with this. There we go. Oh, is that working?
Let's see. That's got us. Lovely.
Look at us go, Wendy. We've got the technology down pat here.
My word, we're good, I tell you. What do they say? Self-praise is no recommendation. So
we'll get there.
Now, if you've got a little box on your screen, you might want to, as you're watching this, you might want to just move the faces of us up into your top right-hand corner of your screen, and that way you'll still be able to see these slides as we go through. I'm going to try not to kill you with slide boredom, but just to make a few points. And I think if we look at what's been going on in Australia this year, it's been a pretty interesting start to the year, hasn't it? And how often have we heard these terms in the last few months, you know, in these uncertain, unprecedented, challenging, difficult times? And if you think about it, from the start of this year, we're coming into, you know, off the tail end of a very long and protracted drought for some of our farmers. It was only a few short months ago that we were really consumed by bushfire. An area bigger than all of England combined of our country was under fire, with huge loss of life, loss of property, loss of community. And then that was followed by floods. Oh, hang on, there we go. Followed by floods, and more recently we've got this global virus response. So it has been strange and difficult times that we live in, and we're hearing those terms quite a bit. So our world's changed really quickly, and we're not really sure of the outcome, are we? When we think about, you know, all the questions that people have, how long will this last? When will there be a vaccine? How long will we have to maintain social distancing? What's our exit strategy? And quite often the answer is almost always that we don't know. Now, as human beings, that creates a bit of a problem for us, because you see how we work, just fundamentally, is our brain, and everything that we do, everything that we think and how we behave is really all predicated on our brain's best guess of what's about to happen next. So having to wait to find out, our thoughts, our feelings, how we behave, all of that can shift and change. Our brain uses all of the information that it has available to make determinations, to make judgments. Without getting too technical, if we think of this as your brainstem, this part of the wrist, the brainstem that comes up, down here we have what we call our memories, our thoughts, our emotions. And that's ruled by a little part of us called the amygdala. And that creates our stories. That's where we store our memories, our emotions, all live down here. And up here in the upstairs part, that's our thinking part of the brain, where we rationalise, where we can conceptualise. When we don't know what's about to happen next, our brain uses this downstairs part of the brain to fill the gap, to make up stories. And sometimes they can be helpful, sometimes not so helpful. Now, we're programmed, as human beings, we're actually programmed to the negative. And the reason for that is that it's about safety. So we're trying to determine all the time, every interaction, everything that we do, our brain is really making a best guess of how safe are we. And when we don't know, then we go looking. What's happened to us in the past? How did we respond? How did we react? What was the outcome? So we go thinking about, you know, what's been happening, and worry. When we start worrying about things, uncertainty is really probably, it underpins all those basic human fears. And our fear of the unknown is really our most fundamental human fear that we have. All of our natural human anxieties and worries are all underpinned by that fear of the unknown, because we don't know what's going to happen next. So worry. When we worry, it really involves repeating that story that our brains told us about what we expect to happen next, or imagining the possibility. Now, the more that you repeat that story or repeat those worries to yourself, the more the brain takes that on board as a permanent thought that it needs to store away as a habit. And it's much, much easier then for it to roll out the worst case scenario when we start worrying. We basically form that habit. To demonstrate what I mean, what I'll get you to do as you're sitting there, I want you just to sit back in your chair and I want you just to cross your arms. Just sit nice and comfy and fold your arms now. Now, you probably did that without really thinking about it. You just fold your arms, and I'd like you to take a look down now and see what arm's on top. Okay. Now, you didn't have to think too much about it. Your brain just made that action. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to change your arms over, fold your arms and put the other arm on top. How does that feel? Comfortable? Probably a little uncomfortable. Maybe you had to think about it a little bit more than you would normally, because your brain's not used to doing that. So that's how we feel when we're confronted by change, our brain doesn't quite know what to make of it. So it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. But if you practice putting that other arm on top often enough, eventually you'll do it without thinking. And so it is when we worry. Our brain goes to that worst case scenario. And I liken worry a little bit to sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you very far. But emotionally, when we worry and when we're tapped into that worst case scenario, when we're not sure, when we are filled with uncertainty and doubt about what might happen, when our brain hasn't got that availability of all the sensory input that we would normally have, it can disturb us. It can make us feel uncomfortable. So in order to feel comfortable, what we tend to do is we tend to do things that will make us feel more comfortable. So often we'll act in ways that we wouldn't normally. And I guess, I don't think there'd be any of us really that when you, for example, if you've been waiting for news to arrive, have you ever noticed that you'll check your emails a little bit more frequently? Maybe go to the letterbox a bit more regularly? Checking the watch? We seek reassurance. And that's a natural part of being human, to seek that, to want that reassurance. We're looking to get the answer. So people can start to act in ways that they feel might make them feel better, but they don't always. So this is where we see those behaviours like stockpiling, shopping for loo paper, stockpiling loo paper, flicking channels on and looking for news. All of those things are basic and natural human reactions that we have. So when we're acting that way, and when those chemicals of concern and worry, when we start worrying and we're not sure about what happens, we're in a state of uncertainty. Our brain is pre-programmed to be alert, to alert to danger. What might happen? I'm not sure. I need to be alert. So if we go back to this little example, downstairs in the emotions part of the brain, in our brain, we actually have two masses on either side, what we call the amygdala. Now, the amygdala's job is to keep us safe. It's pre-programmed. That's its primary purpose. And in fact, it's such an important part of our brain that it's actually one of the very first parts of us that forms in the womb. But it's guided by our emotions and our memories. And when it feels unsafe for any reason, when it doesn't know what's about to happen next, when we don't have all that input of senses, the amygdala is programmed to take over the brain, to jump up from the downstairs brain and take over, to keep us safe. So it floods our body with chemicals, things like cortisol, adrenaline, pump through the body, the heart rate can start to elevate, our breathing can start to come up. All of those things that are really natural and designed to keep us safe, because back in the day we lived in the cave, there were things out there that used to eat us. So it was a handy mechanism to have. But where that goes on for too long, it can have serious implications for us, both physically and what we're going to talk about today, mentally. Social distancing, I just want to touch on that for a moment as well. You see, again, if we go back to that cave days, we are designed to be part of a tribe. We need other people. Physiologically and psychologically, we're designed that way because, you know, technically in the good old days back in the cave, if we were expelled from the tribe, we would most likely die. We needed the tribe for survival. So we're programmed to pick up sensory information from our tribe around us. And when we're disconnected from that, our body, our brain can't really assimilate the information it's used to. I was listening to a woman the other day, a client of mine, and she was talking about a business meeting that she had. And she said it didn't feel like it went so well. She's a very warm and very friendly person, but they didn't shake hands. And she said, you know, I didn't feel at the end of that meeting like we connected. She said, I couldn't sort of win the guy over. I didn't feel like we made that sense of connection. And when we shake hands with people, it's more than just a social nicety. It gives us input. It gives us information that our brain uses to tell us whether we're safe with that person. When we're not able to do those sorts of things, then the brain is lacking that information. And again, it can feel unsafe. I don't quite connect with this person. I'm not sure if I'm safe. So that little amygdala does its job and it switches on, and we're in that heightened state of alert. I hope that makes sense. So we're even telling each other, aren't we, stay safe. How often have we ended conversations lately with that exhortation to stay safe? Now, when we say that to each other, what our brain actually hears is that there's a risk of not being safe. Am I not safe? What's happening? So again, we get that little frisson of fear and the amygdala is triggered. And again, more of those stress hormones course through the body. So if we're not feeling as we would normally be feeling, it's a very natural part of what we're all experiencing at the moment. And a part of what we're experiencing, I'm just going to go back to the screen, I hope. What we're actually experiencing is a form of grief. Now, as we do when we grieve the loss of anything that we value, and at the moment, we've all suffered quite a few losses, haven't we? We've suffered the loss of normalcy, our financial security for some people. They've lost their jobs. Some have lost loved ones. We've lost that connection with each other to a certain degree, that face-to-face. Certain losses of freedoms. And importantly, we've tended to lose our sense of safety. Now, for the first time, we're doing that globally. The whole world is grieving. And we're sharing part of that collective grief. So, and again, when we grieve, we do that as we live. We do that uniquely, based on all of our present and our past, the experiences that we bring to the table, and we all do it in our own unique way. And grief can actually, the feelings of grief can exacerbate all of the other feelings that we might be having at the moment. So on top of our loss of safety, we're also experiencing a minor form of collective grief. So how are we feeling at the moment? You know, people who are already experiencing symptoms of or problematic mental health may be even more impacted, and that's quite a natural thing given what we're all experiencing at the moment. So, hang on. Just talking about what we can control. So, you know, when we look at this circle of control here that you're seeing on the screen, in life there are really three things. There are things that we can control. There are things that we might have some influence over, and then the things that we can't control, that are completely and utterly outside our control. And when you think about it, it's generally the things that we can't control that actually cause us the most stress, isn't it? All those things that are outside our control. Now, fundamentally, out of all those things, there really is only one thing that you have absolute control over, and that's you. A bloke called Charles Swindoll, he actually coined this phrase that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you choose to respond to it. That's pretty much the case, isn't it? We can't fix the bigger circle. We can't fix some of those things that are outside our control. And the more attention we pay to those, the bigger that circle of concern gets. What we can focus on is how we choose to respond to it. And in order to have the best choices about how we respond, we need to have the knowledge, because knowledge is power. We need to understand what's happening to us and what we can do about it. So we need to understand why we're feeling what we're feeling, and then to understand what we might choose to do about that as well. So before we start talking about what we might do to look after ourselves, I think it's important, Lucy, that we understand what's mental health. It's a term that we use often in different ways. Often we use the term mental health when in fact what we're talking about is mental illness. So I just want to elaborate a little bit around mental health at the moment.
That's good, Wendy. I was just going to ask the question about the difference between mental health, and we all have mental health, so mental health and mental ill health, and the difference between grieving and mental health. And is grieving a mental health problem? And that may be what you're about to talk about now, but jumping in, sorry.
Yeah, no, good question. I'm glad you asked it, because grief can in fact impact on our mental health, certainly can. The term mental simply means of mind. So you're right, as Lucy said, we all have mental health. Now it might be, just as we have physical health, we have health of the body, physical health, we have health of the mind, mental health. But our mental health, it can be just like physical health, it can be good health, it can be poor health, or it can be illness, ill health. And that can change throughout our life. Good health, good mental health, sorry, I'll go back one. Good mental health is really about being able to think and feel and react and respond to things that happen to us in the way that we want to. When we're experiencing life's problems, and we all do, I mean, we're all collectively experiencing certain global problems at the moment, but in everyday life, those ups and downs, those adverse events, grief particularly, can really impact on how we feel, on our mental health. And it can have effects on not only our mind, but also on our body. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure and it has affected you physically? Perhaps, loss of sleep, loss of appetite. The two are very much interconnected. So grief can really play a big part in how we feel emotionally, and that can affect our mental health. If it goes on for too long, where adverse feelings or adverse emotions stay with us for too long, it can really impact our mental health and our physical health as well. So we need to stop every now and then and just tap into, how am I feeling? Quite often we don't get taught this stuff at school, really, do we? We get taught all sorts of other things. We get taught that if we cut our knee, put a Band-Aid on it. We get taught to clean our teeth because, we need to maintain good oral hygiene, but we don't always get told how to look after our mind. We need to check in with ourselves from time to time. Now, the World Health Organization, they talk about the 7 domains of well-being that you can see on the screen there now. These are the things that they talk about that need to be in place for us and in balance for us to feel well in our life. I call these the creeks and gullies that feed into our river of life. And they all need to be flowing nice and smoothly to keep our river flowing nice and smoothly. So if you just take a look there, we're looking at mental well-being, and that refers to the ability to make decisions, to problem solve, to think clearly. Academic and career, earning and learning. We should be continuing to do either of those things all through life. Our physical well-being, our social connectedness, our environment, where we live, where we work, where we play, how safe, how secure, how supported do we feel in all of that. Financial well-being. I mean, it's pretty hard to feel great when you can't put food on the table or pay the rent. And spiritual well-being. Just take a minute to think, what do you think I might mean by spiritual well-being?
Pop your thoughts in the chat box, people. What do you think Wendy means by spiritual well-being? What does that mean potentially for you? Because it's different for all of us. So just pop in the chat box what you think spiritual well-being means for you.
Okay, so while you do that, it does mean, as Lucy said, different things for different people. For some people, it might be religion. For other people, it might be just connecting with something outside yourself that gives your life value and meaning and purpose, that connects you to something greater than yourself.
So we've got some responses there, Wendy. Healthy mind, feel that we're doing the right thing morally, be guided by something, open your mind to information. So yeah, they're all really good ideas. Our beliefs and our ethics
all play a really big part, don't they, in sustaining us. So all of those domains, we need to be paying attention. And as life goes, we know that sometimes we have deficits, sometimes we have stronger areas, but as much as we can to keep a balance. Now, at the end of this session, we'll give you some directions to go online to a website to be able to download this. But there's a self-test there that you can download, and I would recommend that you hop on and download the self-test and just check in with yourself from time to time. You can do this really on a weekly or a monthly basis, and just give yourself a little bit of a score. Now, if you can't print out, you can download and print it off my website. But if you don't have access to a printer, you can just pull it up on the screen and write your answers down on a piece of paper. And I really recommend that you take time to do that and just check in. How do I really feel in all of those areas? Are there any areas that I do need to be paying a little bit more attention to right now? It can be quite good to do that on a regular basis. So what causes mental illness? I'll just flick onto the next screen. Mental illness is a term that really, I guess, it refers to a group of illnesses, a little bit like when we talk about heart disease, we're talking about a group of illnesses or a group of disorders that affect the heart. And the same when we talk about mental illness. Mental illness is a diagnosable condition. Now, it's a health problem that significantly affects how a person thinks and feels and behaves. Now, unfortunately, to diagnose mental illness, it is diagnosable against set criteria, but there's no pathology test or blood test that you can take that's going to diagnose mental illness. Often it's based on how the person's feeling at the time. What are they experiencing? What are they feeling? And how's it affecting their life, their relationships, and their ability to function in life? Now, quite often, some of the symptoms of mental illness are common across all illnesses. So it can be, sometimes it takes time to get the correct diagnosis. So I say that because if any of you are struggling with your mental health or you've been in that position, maybe supporting somebody else who is, I always really advocate that you persevere to get a proper diagnosis, because sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error. There's still a number of things there that can take some time to get diagnosed properly. What you're seeing on your screen there, they're the most common mental illnesses and in order of prevalence that we see. And again, mental illness is more common than people realise. It's about 1 in 5 people at any time will be experiencing a mental illness. So, before I go on to that, I think I just want to talk a little bit about what can actually cause mental illness. You know, somebody said to me once, well, what causes it? Well, at this time, scientists don't really know, to be quite frank. They don't have a complete understanding, because if you think about the complexity of the brain and the organisational structure of the brain, and then overlay that with all of the different ways that people can react and respond when they're struggling mentally, you can understand that it can be quite difficult to actually define one cause. And sometimes there's multiple causes. There's really one factor, just the same as what causes us to get physically sick. Sometimes there are obvious cases, sometimes there are obvious causes, sometimes not so much. But generally, three areas that can be involved. Things to do with the body. So, for example, if you're feeling physically unwell, that can affect how you feel mentally. Certain medications, pregnancy, stages of life, menopause, we know for women can be, and the converse, andropause for men, disability, injury, psychological factors, the way that we think, the meaning that we attach to things, what we say to ourselves. Our self-talk's really important, because again, our brain's listening and it believes everything you tell it. Social circumstances, again, where we live, where we work, where we play. where we're born, where we work, where we grow. Sometimes those things can help us to flourish, and sometimes they can be adverse. So there's a complex range of things that can lead to mental illness. There's never really one definitive cause, and it can be different for every person. But what we do know at the moment is that given current circumstances, there is an elevated risk of people experiencing mental health problems. And I'm sorry, I just lost my slide share. There we go. Risk can increase after a crisis. Now, during a time of crisis, I don't want to bog you down with too much technicality, but if you just have a look at on the screen here, you'll see a bit of a diagram. What actually happens when we're leading into a crisis, if there's, community wellbeing can vary at different times. Leading into a crisis, if there's a notification that a crisis is imminent, then there can be a dip in wellbeing. But then during the crisis, and we've seen this recently, haven't we, during our time of bushfires and more recently with this current crisis, people pulling together in that what we call heroic stage or the honeymoon phase of coming together at the time of crisis. But the real risk area for people is going to be as we come out of this crisis time. As you can see here, this downward slope after the crisis. That's when life becomes back to normal, but is it a different normal? And maybe it's not the same normal we were used to. Maybe we don't feel as comfortable. If you think of the crossing the arms, it doesn't feel so comfortable at the start. So again, reconstructing, making sense of what's happened, that time of increased danger. Why did I feel that way? Why am I feeling different now? These are all risk times that can really increase risk for people who are already struggling. So we need to be alert. We need to be keeping an eye out for each other. And particularly as we come out the other side of this time of disconnection. It's really important that we take that time to come together. And a lot of people don't really understand what's happening to me. We can be a bit tough on ourselves when we don't know what's going on. Why did I act that way? Why did I stockpile all that loo paper? They can be things that can make us sort of question who we are and what we are. So we need to be a little bit kind with ourselves and with each other. I just want to share this next diagram with you. This is what you're looking at on the screen here now. This is a picture of what we call neurons. Now, in our brain, each and every one of us have between 800 to 1,000 billion. 800 to 1,000 billion of these little invisible strands in our brain that are called neurons, and their job is to transmit and receive messages. And they do that using what you can see here, chemicals in our body. Things that you might have heard of, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all of those chemicals are used to transmit and receive messages. So when we're struggling with our mental health, and going back to Lucy's question earlier about when we're grieving, that can have an impact. When we're under stress and those cortisol and adrenaline, those stress hormones are coursing through our body, that can actually impact on how those messages in the brain are being transmitted and received. It can impact on the level of our chemical structure. Nerves can be damaged. Those little transparent nerve endings, they can be damaged as well. Now, that again, certain medications can cause damage. Alcohol, drug use, trauma. We know that in trauma, when these neurons fire together, sometimes they wire together. And when they wire together, that can change the structure of our brain. So mental health problems, and not necessarily illness, but even a mental health problem can make it hard for people to think because those messages aren't always getting through. So it can make it hard to solve problems and even to seek help.
Wendy, I've got a question that I might just jump in there if it's okay. And also we've just got about 10 minutes left to go. So the question is, how do we know if we have a mental illness? So if you cut your knee, it's obvious, you can see that. But with mental illness, how do we know that the way that we're feeling is different from what seemed to be normal?
And again, that's where the self-awareness is really important. So I'm glad you asked that question. And it's just taking notice of those changes You know, there's an old expression about a frog in hot water, and I don't know if it's true, so don't do it at home for heaven's sakes, but it said that if you put a frog in hot water, it'll probably jump straight back out. But if you put a frog into cold water and you slowly turn up the heat, then that little frog will sit there until it's really in danger. And sometimes as human beings, we can be a little bit like a frog. You know, we can sit there and we just take the heat, and we take the heat, and we take the heat. But what a clinician's going to look at is three things: the duration, how long have you felt that way? It's quite natural, and it's a natural human experience to feel bad occasionally when things happen. But if that's prolonged, and if it's having an impact and you're feeling that way most of the time, then you need maybe to get a little bit of attention to it. So duration, severity, what's the impact? And I say there are four things: liver, lover, livelihood, law. Is it impacting on your physical health? Liver. Lover, what's the impact on your relationships? Livelihood, earning and learning, is it impacting there? Are you struggling at work? Are you struggling in your schooling? And law is what you're doing, you know, making you act in a way that you wouldn't normally act, I guess. So when you're feeling not on top of your game and maybe struggling, it might not be a mental illness. It just might be that your mental health isn't as great as it could be. Diet, exercise, all those sorts of things are important. So we need to, I guess, pay attention to those things more than ever at a time when we're probably under undue stress and pressure as well. But if in doubt, get it checked out. Now, we only have 10 minutes, so I want to scoot very quickly through to how might we help somebody that we're concerned about, because I think that's really what a lot of you have tapped in today to find out about. There are certain things that we might notice about somebody, so I'm going to try and do this screen share and shoot through and flick through very quickly a couple of screens. I just want to reflect on this firstly, though, that we're all in this together. We've heard that phrase quite a bit, haven't we? We're all in this together, but unfortunately, not everybody feels that way. Some people are feeling quite alone at the moment, and we need to be aware of who might they be. And if you're concerned, again, if in doubt, check them out. We need to be together. So, supporting others, there are a range of things that we can do on it. Sorry, I'm flying around all over the place. Here we go. Supporting others, there are a number of practical ways that we can do that. Dropping off supplies to somebody who might be vulnerable, purchasing gift vouchers, donations, organising get-togethers. I have friends that we probably didn't see each other more than once a month regularly anyway. We've now formed an online book club once a week, and I think we'll probably keep that going once we come out of isolation as well. Not everybody is able to hop into the online space, so if you're good in that area, maybe helping somebody who's not so good to connect up and get online. Donating your knowledge. Checking in with those who are struggling. We've got more time on our hands at the moment, so we can use that to take time to say hello to people that we might have let slip. But in doing that, we might recognise that somebody has a problem, and there are some signs that we might look for. Physical signs, some or any of those that you can see on the screen there now. Maybe the person's experiencing some difficulties in their life that you know about and you're aware about. Maybe it's something that you've heard somebody saying. I'm over it, can't be bothered, it's all too hard, I'm tired, I'm useless, what's the point? So these are all little signs that we might look for that might give us a bit of an indication. And I always say, if you've got a feeling of concern, act on it. If in doubt, check it out. And 3 ways that you can do that. There are 3 simple steps that can help you to do that. All you have to remember is all. ALL. Ask questions. Listen to what the person has to tell you respectfully and with no judgment, respectful of their pain or their circumstances, and then help link that person to the help that they need if they need it. Ask, listen, link. That's all you have to remember. But asking, that can be tricky, can't it? How do you ask? How do you just bowl into these conversations? Well, the first thing is you might tell the person what it was that you saw in their behaviour, what you heard them saying, or what you noticed. I heard, I've seen, I've heard, I've noticed, and I'm concerned for you. And let them know that you care. I'm here and I care. What can I do to help right now? because I've seen and I've heard, I've noticed. It can be a good way to open the conversation because people can't argue with those facts. They're what you've seen and noticed. Listen, get the person talking, take them seriously, and then listen. Most people don't listen. Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And I think sometimes we feel like that when we're setting out to help somebody, we have to have all the answers or we need to know what to do. You don't. These are the best tools that you can use. That's why you've got 2 of them. So use your ears and just listen. Because when we allow people the space to tell us what's happening, to share that problem, if we go back to this model of the brain again, while the emotions are in control, the thinking goes offline. By allowing people to tell us where they're at and what's happening, it can help to reconnect that thinking part of the brain for them. So just listening. And then asking them if they need help, and if they do, help them to find the help that they need, linking them up. Putting a bit of a plan together. It might be professional support, other people who can help. There might be some self-help strategies that they can use. And sometimes it's simple things that we're going to look at in a minute of what people might be able to do to look after themselves. But people are much more likely to seek help if someone they know and trust recommends it. And that's where you can all play a part in helping people that you know. But before you can help anybody else, first of all, you've got to look after yourself because you can't get a drink out of an empty cup. So, and the fact that you're all on here today tells me that you're here to learn how you can help other people. So you're givers. And then when you're giving out to other people, you've got to build yourself back up again. Keep that cup topped up so that you've got plenty to give. So a little 5-finger plan. And again, you can go onto my website and you can download this. And there are some suggestions there as well on the back page of this. Your little daily plan. Firstly, connecting up. Now, even just being here today, even remotely, it's a way of staying connected. But pick up the phone, talk to people, say hello to the postman when he delivers, if he still delivers. Connecting up in every way that you can, staying connected is really, really important. We need our tribe now more than ever. Taking notice. When was the last time that you actually stopped and really noticed what's going on around you? The other day I was sitting here, and I was looking out my window, and I'm sitting here in Gravelly Beach as we speak, and I've got a lovely big paddock across the road. And I saw a beautiful image of the horse taking off across the paddock, and I was able to get it on my camera, and I thought, wow, they've been there for months and I've never really noticed. Taking notice of what's around us. Keeping on learning. The fact that you're here today, you've ticked that box. Keep on learning, hopefully, learn something new. Being active, even in minor ways. When we're active, our body is designed to move and it creates those chemicals that help our brain to work. On the keeping on learning, I have a friend who's 81. She's actually teaching herself piano off YouTube. There is nothing that you can't learn off YouTube, trust me. I designed my website off YouTube. It's fabulous. So again, take time to learn and giving. In doing things for other people, we make ourselves feel better. So you can download your daily plan and just simple little ways that you can look after yourself. Really, really important because we do need to look after ourselves and each other. And there are some resources there that I'll just leave up for a moment so you can take those down if you like. Of where you can get some help and support. My website, talkingabout.net.au, headhealth.gov.au, and coronavirus.beyondblue.org.au. We've got some wonderful resources around, how people might be feeling given current circumstances.
I'm going to have to butt in there, Wendy, because we're very, very quickly running out of time. So, I might get Hayden, my colleague, to put those links into the chat box because we're just about to go out of time, but we have got some great questions. So if we can just
so let's have some questions.
Those questions. So one of the questions was that little test that you put up before.
Yes.
About the different areas of well-being. We had a few questions about what if the scores of that are really bad? That test looks scary. What do we do then?
Well, if you go to the website, it will tell you what to do then. It's got all the instructions.
Oh, great.
So when you download the test or even just bring it up on the screen, it'll give you some suggestions of what, depending on what your score is, where you need to go next with that.
Okay, great. So people could also take a screen dump of that slide that Wendy's got up now if they'd like to as well. And we'll also make that available on our Healthy Tasmania website and also the Starting Point Neighbourhood House. And the last question for you today, Wendy, before we sign off was, how many days does it need to go for to become a mental illness? So, for example, we all have a bad day, but do I need to have a month of bad days before it counts as a mental illness? So what's the kind of the duration?
Yeah. Look, again, for every illness, it's a different diagnostic criteria. Just the same as, the difference between diabetes and a heart condition will have different structures around it. So there are different diagnostic criteria for each and every illness, because each and every illness is different and it has different frameworks, different challenges, I guess. But generally, most doctors will look at a period of about 2 weeks. If it goes beyond 2 weeks, then we would definitely say that, go and have a talk to somebody, maybe talk to your GP and ask for a referral to a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist for a full diagnosis.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that is about recognising it in yourself, isn't it? And then seeking help. That's the next step.
That's it. And that's what I mean when I said that the importance of really tapping in and being aware of yourself and any of those changes in yourself. Don't let them go for too long, because just like with physical illness, the longer we leave it, the more lengthy the recovery period will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the first step is always to see your GP. And I think the rule of thumb too is it doesn't hurt to ask. So if you go to your GP and you say, I've been feeling worried or I've been feeling anxious about this, the best outcome you can get is they say, that's normal and you will be okay. So that doesn't hurt. So it doesn't hurt to ask, and it's okay to ask. There's some sayings that we use all the time. So
that's it. That reassurance can be helpful. It can take away some of that stress and uncertainty that might be feeding into those worries and those stories that the brain might be making up for us.
Yeah, great. Look, we're going to have to sign off. We're way over time. And thank you, Wendy. You have inspired us all today. You've given us some really simple and easy steps. The chat box is going off with how impressed people are with you and that they want to listen to you all day. And I could do that too. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you so much to Wendy for your time. Go to Wendy's website, which is talkingabout.net.au. Don't forget, these sessions are all recorded. We'll have them up on the Healthy Tasmania and the Starting Point Neighbourhood House websites and Facebook pages. And please tune in next week to listen to David Backer, who is a psychologist, and he's going to teach us all about apps and websites where we can get help. But a handy tip is he's also a comedian. He's a pretty funny bloke. So, he's got the clinical qualifications, but he's also going to make us laugh. So tune in next week at 10 o'clock. If you have any feedback for us at Healthy Tasmania for the way the session ran, what you could see on screen and the interaction between us, we'd love to hear that too, because we're always wanting to improve. You can do that by emailing us at admin@healthytasmania.com.au, and I'll pop that in the chat box in a minute. So thanks again, Wendy. Thanks again to everybody from across Tasmania for joining us. Stay mentally well, everybody, and we will see you next week at 10 o'clock.